Paris, January 21, 1793, 20,000 people packed into a public square, breath fogging in the cold, dead silent except for the occasional drum roll. A man climbs a wooden platform. He's 38, slightly overweight, kind of awkward. Actually, witnesses say he fumbles trying to speak to the crowd before he's cut off. 4 years earlier, this man was on paper the most powerful human being on the entire continent of Europe. Absolute monarch, chosen by God according to everyone including himself. Now he's just a guy about to lose his head in front of a crowd that's cheering for it. Here's the twist you don't usually hear: the people who cut his head off, a lot of them are going to lose theirs too, within a year, to the same machine, built by the same revolution. So what actually happens when regular people decide kings are optional? Turns out a lot. Let's go back to the beginning. Hey, welcome back. Today, the French Revolution, 10 years, one country, and arguably more political DNA passed down to the modern world than any other single decade in history. Democracy, human rights, the idea that governments work for you, not the other way around, all of it traced back to Paris, 1789. But here's what most summaries skip. This isn't a clean underdog story. It's not tyrant falls, freedom wins, credits roll. It's closer to a slow-motion car crash where the people trying to save the car keep steering it harder into the wall. Stick with me, by the end you'll understand why historians still can't agree if this was humanity's finest hour or its scariest warning label. Quick reality check on 1780s Europe. Kings didn't just rule countries, they ruled by divine right, meaning God personally, apparently, picked them. Questioning that wasn't rude. It was borderline insane as far as most people were concerned. And France was the superpower, not military first, cultural. Everyone in Europe wanted to speak French, dress French, think French. Versailles wasn't just a palace, it was basically the flex of the century, a monument to we have so much money we don't know what to do with it. Except that last part wasn't true anymore, and that's the problem. Picture this like a pyramid, 28 million people in France. At the very tip, the king and his court floating around Versailles in silk, 12 miles outside Paris, in a bubble so thick they genuinely didn't know how bad things had gotten for everyone else. At the base of the pyramid, peasants and city laborers packed into narrow, filthy Parisian streets, one bad harvest away from actual starvation. Not tighten-the-belt hard times, actual hunger. That's not a country, that's a powder keg with a fuse already lit. It just doesn't know it yet. Quick cast rundown, because you'll want to remember these names. Louis XVI, not a monster. Kind of a nerd, honestly loved locksmithing and hunting more than actual governing, just catastrophically out of his depth. Marie Antoinette, Austrian-born queen, became the internet hate figure of her century. Fair or not, she absorbs the blame for royal excess. Maximilien Robespierre, quiet, obsessive, incorruptible lawyer. Doesn't drink, doesn't chase women, believes in virtue with the intensity of a man who's about to become terrifying. Georges Danton, the opposite, loud, huge, magnetic, the guy whose speech could make a mob march anywhere. And the real main character of this whole story, the Third Estate, 97% of France with almost none of the power. Remember that number, it's the whole plot. So how does the shiniest country in Europe end up broke? One word, war, specifically decades of it plus interest. Here's the twist Americans rarely hear in school. France helped bankroll our revolution against Britain. Good for us, financially brutal for them. By the 1780s, a staggering chunk of the entire French budget was going just to paying interest on debt, not even the debt itself, just the interest. And who's paying for it? Not the people who could actually afford to. The nobles and the church, the wealthiest slice of French society, were largely tax-exempt. The bill landed on peasants and merchants instead. Imagine your landlord and your boss both paying zero tax while you fund the entire country. That's the vibe. France ran on something called the Estates General, split into 3 groups. First estate, the clergy; second estate, the nobility; third estate, literally everyone else, 97% of the country. Here's the rigged part: each estate got exactly 1 vote, total, not per person, per estate. So the tiny, wealthy 3% could always outvote the other 97%, 2-to-1 every single time. It's like 3 people voting on pizza toppings, except 2 of them own 0 slices and still get to overrule the guy who's starving. That's not an oversight, that's the design. Strip away the dates and it's three forces slamming together at once. 1. The treasury is empty. 2. The social system is medieval, but the economy underneath it isn't anymore. 3. And this is the wild card, Enlightenment philosophy has gone mainstream. Writers like Rousseau and Voltaire have spent decades arguing that power should come from reason and consent, not bloodline, and people are actually reading this, in coffee houses, in salons, out loud. Combine an empty wallet, a broken class system, and a population that just found out the whole thing might be optional. That's not a crisis, that's ignition. 1788, brutal harvest failure. Bread prices spike hard. And bread wasn't a side dish back then. For a lot of Parisians, it was basically the entire diet. Some estimates put bread eating up 80% of a laborer's income. Imagine 80% of your paycheck going to a loaf of bread every week with no end in sight. Riots start. The king is out of money and out of ideas, so he does something no French king has done in 175 years. He calls the Estates General into session, hoping it'll somehow fix things. He has absolutely no idea, he just pulled the pin on a grenade. May 1789. The Estates General finally meets first time since 1614 and instantly deadlocks over the exact same rigged voting system we just talked about. The Third Estate is told, again, one vote, same as everybody else, doesn't matter that you're 97% of the room. They snap. June 17th, the Third Estate declares itself the National Assembly, no royal permission asked. 3 days later, locked out of their usual hall, maybe on purpose, they pile into an indoor tennis court instead and swear an oath, we do not leave until France has a constitution. The tennis court oath? Not a battle, not a riot, just a room full of people saying out loud for the first time, the king doesn't automatically get the final word anymore. Rumors spread that the king is quietly moving troops toward Paris to crush this new assembly. True or not, doesn't matter, the city believes it. July 14th, 1789. A crowd marches on the Bastille, a fortress prison that's basically the physical symbol of everything people hate about royal power. There, after gunpowder and weapons, after a chaotic standoff, the garrison surrenders. Militarily, barely a footnote, only a handful of prisoners even get freed. Symbolically, it's an earthquake. Ordinary people just beat the king's own fortress by force. That date is still France's national holiday. This is the moment the whole thing stops being an argument and becomes a war. Once the Bastille falls, things move fast, like dizzyingly fast. Early August, the Assembly abolishes feudal privileges in one single overnight session. Centuries of noble tax breaks and church dues gone, practically while everyone was asleep. Later that month, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Liberty, equality, popular sovereignty, written down as universal rights, not royal favors. Then October, thousands of Parisian women, furious over, you guessed it, bread again, march 12 miles to Versailles itself and physically drag the royal family back to Paris. From here on, Louis and Marie Antoinette aren't rulers anymore, they're hostages wearing crowns. 1791, the royal family tries to sneak out of France in disguise. They get recognized and caught at a town called Varennes, allegedly because someone spotted the king's face on a coin he used to pay for something. Dragged back to Paris in total humiliation. Whatever trust remained, gone. 1792, France, now surrounded by hostile monarchies terrified this idea might spread, declares war on Austria. The monarchy is suspended in August after a violent uprising. By September, France is officially a republic. Louis isn't a king anymore, he's a prisoner with a number. January 1793, Louis XVI, convicted of treason, is executed, the scene we opened on. Killing the king isn't a step, it's a door slamming shut behind them. There's no walking this back now. France is a republic at war with most of Europe, fracturing internally between revolutionary factions. So the government creates the Committee of Public Safety, run by Robespierre, the quiet, incorruptible lawyer from earlier. His mission, protect the revolution, by any means necessary. What follows is the Reign of Terror. Roughly 17,000 people officially executed, thousands more dead without real trials, a rumor, a denunciation, an old grudge with the wrong neighbor. That's enough now. The revolution that started as a demand for rights is now eating its own citizens to stay safe. Here's the gut punch part. Robespierre becomes convinced that only total purity can save the revolution, meaning enemies now include his own former allies. April 1794, Georges Danton, the loud, magnetic guy from our cast list, one of the most popular men in the entire revolution, is arrested and executed on Robespierre's orders. If Danton isn't safe, nobody is. And that's exactly the problem. By July 1794, Robespierre's own colleagues start wondering if they're next. So they move first. Robespierre is arrested, and the next day, with none of the drawn-out trial he gave so many others, he's guillotined in the same square as the king. The revolution just executed the man who built its execution machine. The second Robespierre is gone, the terror stops almost like a fever breaking. A shakier, more corrupt government called the Directory takes over from 1795 to 1799. But France is wrecked, politically exhausted, money's a mess, still at war with half of Europe. They toppled a king and survived a terror, but they still haven't actually fixed the country. Into that gap walks a young general who's been winning battle after battle abroad and who's about to make this story a lot bigger: Napoleon Bonaparte. 1799, Napoleon stages a coup. A few years later, he crowns himself emperor, which, yes, kind of funny in a dark way. France fought a bloody, decade-long war to get rid of one all-powerful ruler and ended up with another one. But look underneath. Feudal privilege, gone for good. Legal equality, now the actual standard. The idea that power comes from the people instead of bloodline has been tested at full national scale, messily, violently, but proven possible. You cannot unring that bell, no matter who's sitting on the throne now. Inside France, the old order is just gone. Feudalism, dead. The church loses its special legal status and most of its land. A new legal system, later formalized as the Napoleonic Code, locks in equality before the law and property rights as the baseline, not the exception. And as Napoleon's armies roll across Europe, they drag this legal code along with them, whether the conquered countries asked for it or not. Nationalism, the idea of a whole population rallying behind one shared identity, basically takes its modern shape right here. The aftershocks don't stop at the French border. The Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars redraw the map of Europe repeatedly for the next 2 decades. But the bigger export is the vocabulary: liberty, equality, fraternity, the rights of man. Independence movements in Latin America, reform movements across Europe, uprisings on continents that had barely heard of France before. All of them, at some point, borrow language that was first shouted in the streets of Paris in 1789. So what actually survives all this bloodshed? Modern republics. Written constitutions as the default, not the exception. The idea that revolution is a legitimate tool citizens can reach for, not some unthinkable act of madness. The French Revolution didn't invent the idea that people could govern themselves. Enlightenment philosophers had been saying that for decades already. But this is the moment that idea got stress-tested in public at full scale, and the world watched every bloody, glorious, horrifying second of it. 3 things worth sitting with. 1. Revolutions almost never end where they start. The people who light the fuse are rarely the ones still standing when the smoke clears. 2. Good intentions don't protect you from tyranny. Robespierre wasn't some cartoon villain twirling a mustache. He believed in virtue more sincerely than almost anyone in the room. And that's exactly how he built a machine that killed thousands. 3. Inequality left to fester long enough doesn't just quietly fix itself. Eventually, something breaks. History's pretty consistent on that point. So that's the whole arc. A bankrupt treasury, an oath sworn on a tennis court, a stormed fortress, a beheaded king, a terror that ate its own creators, and an emperor climbing out of the wreckage to rule half of Europe. 10 years. Maybe the single most consequential decade in modern political history, and honestly, we're all still living in its aftershocks. Here's what I keep coming back to. The people who stormed the Bastille believed completely they were fighting for freedom. The people running the terror 4 years later believed the exact same thing. Same ideal, wildly different body count. So where's the actual line between a revolution that liberates people and one that starts devouring itself? Genuinely curious what you think, drop it in the comments. And if you want the next chapter, how a cocky young artillery officer named Napoleon turned this wreckage into an empire, subscribe because that one's coming next.